Do you watch the news and feel anxious? Here at Restore-A-Thon, we equip you to make a difference with ecological problems. This is your chance to be part of a powerful, community-driven force for positive change. So get ready to be inspired, learn from the best, and put your skills into action. Are you with us? Here's our host, Ellie Young.
Welcome back to the Restore-A-Thon podcast. My name is Ellie Young and I'm your host, and this is our third episode. Today we're actually going to dive further into solutions. We have two sections of this podcast. We'll hear first from Jon Connors, our producer, who will tell us a little bit about the Restore-A-Thon. What exactly is it that we're here to do, and how do we start to do that?
We need your help to execute these community-driven solutions. Visit restore-a-thon.com/donate and please contribute whatever you can.
If you actually are trying to, clean everything as fast as possible, how does that get done?
Well, one of the things that I've called for early on was a better understanding of the groundwater well situation. And this is true for East Palestine specifically, and it's true for almost all of our watersheds in that how many groundwater wells are in that community today? They don't have a database. They don't really know. There's never really been a survey. Nobody knows how deep they are. Nobody knows when the last time they were pumped. Nobody understands, is somebody watering an alfalfa field? Is somebody watering their backyard? What's the water being used for? Are there industrial wells in the area? There's no real good understanding of that in East Palestine or virtually in most of the watersheds in North America. And so what happens is people don't understand the distance water will travel underground. It went into the creek. Did it go under? They've flooded that park twice in the city. The East Palestine City Park's been flooded twice because of temporary dam structures the contractors put in place so that they can aerate the water in the most crazy aeration plan I've ever seen in my life. But they are aerating it. They have dammed it, and it's flooded out twice. Well, all that contaminated water, it's going down wells and could go into sumps, could go down well shafts, could go all over. They don't know.
Welcome, Jon Connors. It is great to be sitting with you in person in Sebastopol, California today. So tell us, how is it that you have been associated with the Terminator movie? Is there something here that I need to know about?
Well, thank you, Ellie, for having me. And Jon Connor is the fictional character who, saved the world from AI, from the killer AI. Mm-hmm. And I'm, though I'm Jonathan Connors, mm-hmm. I'm all about restorative and regenerative AI that takes care of the planet. So just a slight tweak to that story.
Right. So we have the 1980s Terminator, and we're now in the 2020s where we are living in the real life situation where we're actually maybe going to see like machines come to life and who knows what else. And you are showing up as the rejuvenator, right? You are actually going to bring those new technologies into a space where we're doing something for the planet, which is really exciting. So that's kind of the concept.
Before you keep, I just want to note, I'm not going to. Our panelists and the team in the community and the experts that are showing up here are going to be really bringing this technology forth. I personally am just the community builder and storyteller.
Okay, so we still need the Terminator, but we have someone who is asking for that. So that's really what Restore-A-Thon is about, right? Is bringing together all of these people, diverse perspectives to what exactly?
Well, it started out, Restore-A-Thon, especially with this partnership with Better Worlds, but with this news story, this news show with you as the host. But instead of you sitting at home and becoming anxious and being scared and frustrated, like the news tends to do to us mm-hmm. frequently, this news channel gives us the opportunity to get out of our seats, take action, and fix the world around us.
So how do we do that?
In East Palestine, we have 5 experts today that are going to talk a little bit about technology, art, culture, and the role of restoring and rejuvenating. Mm-hmm. But we're going to start with Daniel Swid, who's going to talk about environmental remediation, environmental litigation, MRV. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so imagine if it becomes 10 times cheaper to sue polluters not to say we're here to attack Norfolk Southern, but if you do pollute, and it becomes easier for us to litigate against polluters, I think that would make a cleaner planet.
Yeah, I mean, definitely one of the things that's happening is because there's not really a lot of implementation of regulation, which we learned in the last episode. It's cheaper not to worry about things like spills, right? But if there was an actual way to bring, I mean, no one wants penalties, but also no one wants pollution. So if there was a way to enforce that, then maybe Norfolk Southern would not have taken, the shortcuts that they did that got us here.
Really well said. I mean, the climate issue tends to be a divisive issue. One of the things we're seeing in our polling, especially in Ohio and such, is everybody's a yes to clean water and clean air and clean soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when you see what that's like, right? Like talking to Jessica Connard in the first episode, she gave us a little bit of sort of a real life picture of the kind of damage, but even following her after that on Twitter, she's talked about, bleeding, her dog being sick, her son and herself having lots of different kinds of health impacts. So when you start to see that this is what we're talking about, right? Like illness in your family, it becomes something that I think everyone can relate to.
Big time. And so then to go back to your first question of what do we do about it? First we have to become ecologically competent and really understand the problem and unpack it. And then we need to learn how to take action. And we have really, I mentioned Daniel, but we have some other really amazing guests this evening. We're going to tell us a little bit of insight on how we could potentially take action. And then we have, if you go to our website, www.restore-a-thon.com, the first button you'll see is called Restore with Us. And then come into our Discord channel, and then we'll see together how we fix this. We're not here to pretend to be Superman, Superwomen, or super non-binary, but we are, we instead are going to stand together and say, we are smart as a collective. And if we get the right people with the right skill sets, the right colleges, universities, and the right experts in the local community, the right political leaders, the right NGOs, EPA Great Lakes, we're coming for you in the most best, beautiful way possible. I think we can really solve these problems in a way that we've never before in human history, because AI is going to disrupt every bit of our lives. We might as well use AI and other technology to restore and regenerate the planet.
That's right. I mean, if the entire planet is going to be just reformed in the next 10, 20, however many years we have, why not fix it? Surely we can do that as well. And, I think with sustainability, for anyone that sort of is newer to this space, a lot of the work is really building agreement between stakeholders, right? You just mentioned all of these different types of people. We have a ton of expertise on the panel, and then there's the EPA, there's the state governments, there's a million people with a million different perspectives, and simply bringing that together is a lot of the challenge of getting these issues addressed. So I think that's what we're really shooting for here, right? Is to kind of show what the issues are, explain some of the facets of issues and solutions, and then empower people to kind of go into their communities and see what else might be there. There might be more resources than you would ever expect, right?
Well said. Yeah, there's human capital, is the humans that surround us, the expertise that exists in our community is we're rich in human capital. Let's deploy it in the best way possible, and hopefully enjoy the inflow of financial capital and other forms of capital that come from that.
Excellent. Yes. So let's just spotlight a few of our other panelists. It's easy for us to talk about Daniel because he's one of our partners, but we also have Ryan Yakovachi. Would you like to share about his background?
Ryan Yakovachi is going to be speaking about myconaut.space, and he's a mycoremediation expert. So, I don't know if you guys know this, but oyster mushrooms eat vinyl chloride, nom, nom, nom. Well, let's let them loose. You know what I mean?
Eat them out.
Yeah. Definitely don't nom on the oyster mushrooms that nom on the pollution. That would be
So, and we heard about that as a strategy from I think it was Bob in our last episode. So I'm really excited to hear from Ryan. We also have Mariette Papic, who is sharing about AI, ecological AI. What's that?
So Mariette's an artist and a multimedia artist and writer who's programming a large language model right now. And she's, going to speculate, because it hasn't been built yet, on what to do with, what would it look like in a bioregion or a watershed, a geographic region represented by similar plants, animals, insects, things like that. What if there was this little Star Wars like droid that could educate the community educate lawmakers on ecological concepts and what's going on. And then we become that eco-competent collective that can make better decisions so that we all have clean water, clean air, clean soil, and that we all desire.
Which allows us to make more collective decisions about our bioregions and be more engaged in the environmental problems and opportunities that we are facing. What about DJ J. Kind?
DJ J. Kind's a buddy of mine who's actually the catalyst for this event. You know, I was thinking about getting people together to solve the Fukushima restoration issue, and it's a large nuclear power plant issue. And Jay Kind came to me and said, "Hey, you know what's going on in East Palestine?" And I said, I don't know. And he's a longtime burner. He's a DJ, and he understands from Burning Man and from his arts and culture background how community and celebration can be a real catalyst for transforming the world around us.
Yeah, what we need is momentum, initiative, excitement, something that we believe we can actually do. So really excited to find that we're going to actually go from Burning Man to fixing the planet together.
Restoring human,
With the Terminator guy. All right, so join us after the break. We'll be back for the panel.
Ready to make a difference? Be part of the action. Go to www.restore-A-Thon.com and click Restore With Us button to join our Discord today. Stand with Aaron Brockovich, Jess Connard, Tom Bevan, and the local community by visiting www.eastpalestinejustice.com. The environmental and human trauma incurred from this train derailment requires appropriate restitution.
Quite frankly, just as an outside observer with, inside knowledge and actually working with the community, if I was the railroad company, I'd want to go out and prove that we're one step ahead of the government. We do know, and that's the truth. Industry is always one step ahead of regulations. The reason industry participates in the regulatory setting process is because they love a line in the sand, because then they can just figure out how to get around it. Which is why the railroad didn't break any laws here. They went right up to the edge of the law and never looked over. So they're going to always be in a situation where they didn't violate any laws, but they got right up to them. What they need to do is they need to take the information at the federal government level, at that Clean Water Act level, and literally impose it on themselves and stop this nonsense of taking, water down to Texas to deep well inject and dirt over to Indiana and dumping it at a hazardous waste landfill. It makes for great news at 5 o'clock, but you really didn't do anything.
Welcome back, and hello to everyone on our panel. I'd love to start out with just a few intros. So I will go around and ask for maybe a 1 or 2 minute synopsis of what you do. Just tell us your name, your organization, and the offer that you have here to discuss about the Restore-A-Thon. Daniel, let's start with you.
Hey there, thanks a lot, Ellie. My name is Daniel Swid, and I'm with the MRV Collective, which is MRV stands for Measurement, Reporting, and Verification. And we are an industry coalition advancing the strategic applications of MRV technologies to address biodiversity loss and climate change.
Exciting to hear about that. Ryan Yakovachi, please tell us about you.
Sure, thanks, Ellie. Thanks for having me. So I'm a co-founder of Myconaut, and we're a fungal biotech company that is specializing in finding problems and turning them into solutions, embracing kind of that permaculture principle. And we grow mushrooms and we grow them on weird things and we see what happens. And we're hoping to, really add something to this conversation.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that permaculture really needs is to scale. So hopefully that's something that you're able to bring, and really looking forward to hearing about that in this context. Mariette Papic, how about you?
Hi, Ellie. Hi, everyone this evening. So I am a writer and multimedia artist, and I'm here today representing my work with the Design Science Studio, which is a project by Hab Ritual and the Buckminster Fuller Institute. And we've been working on regenerative arts and the intersection between design and restoration of the earth.
Exciting, bringing in some art and culture too. That's an excellent way to approach this. DJ J Kind, I know you also are in that space. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Hi, I'm Jay Kind. I'm a co-owner of a record label here in the Bay Area called Yes Records. I'm a DJ and producer. I've been DJing since 2001, mostly house and techno. I'm also a proud member of a collective called Air Pusher. We have an art car that we take to Burning Man Festival every year.
Cool. Okay. And I kind of want to just ask everyone for like a quick background, super quick story. How did you get into this sort of environmental space? Was there like a trigger moment, or, have you always been kind of a hippie? My background is, I actually got my degree in sustainability 12 years ago. Did you have a similar kind of introduction, or what did it look like for everyone to start out here? And we'll just go in the same order: Daniel, Ryan, Mariette, and DJ J.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I grew up in California, and I used to spend my summers, backpacking in the Sierra Nevadas. I was a scout, and I had a lot of outdoor time. So I think that nature connection really just solidified something within my soul. Years later, I went to school at UC Santa Cruz, another really beautiful place in the world. I ended up getting a computer engineering degree. And I spent some years working in software development, working at the low level, embedded systems, that kind of thing. And years later, I started working for a large enterprise company in Silicon Valley called VMware, which has helped bring cloud computing to the market. And I remember some all hands meetings that we would have where they would talk about how VMware was improving the world by lowering the energy consumption of data centers. And I kept thinking about that and thinking technology has got to be, more to technology than just lowering data center consumption. And I ended up leaving VMware sometime later, and really got caught up in the climate space. And I took some time off, and really started to pay attention to my local community. I got involved in 350.org as an activist. And there I saw a lot of people who were upset and were looking for a scapegoat, looking for somebody to blame. And one of the first places to look is the fossil fuel industry. And as an engineer, I got tired of that pretty quickly because I can build a lot of things. And I started to focus on those who provide solutions. And it was a relief to find others who were focused on solutions, and so focused on community building, focused on relationships, focused on health, and there's so much excitement in that space. And so then I spent some years just supporting a lot of different change makers around the world, from growing kelp in the open ocean to Web3 and ecological blockchains, to mangroves and nature-based solutions. And today at the MRV Collective, supporting, as I mentioned earlier, an industry alliance that's of many different technology providers, things like eDNA, which can, look at, do like species analysis on water and the health of water, just an analysis of what sort of species are in the water. To bioacoustics, to different kinds of remote sensing technologies that can measure the carbon in the soil with like a stick, to satellites and drones and LiDAR, these kinds of things. So.
Yeah, I love that you brought up building, right? Because engineering and community making are, those are sort of the big categories of like skills and solutions that we are bringing together, both at Restore-A-Thon, but more broadly in this problem space. And there's really a lot that we can do when we start to realize and look into the details of, what's happening in an ecosystem, or what, something like an oyster mushroom can do. So I love that you brought that up. And that's really what we're about here at Restore-A-Thon. Ryan, what's your eco-hippie background story?
Man, yeah. So it's a little more blue collar at some degree. I'm originally from Flint, Michigan. So I grew up kind of around, the Rust Belt of, GM, and my family working the lines there, and went to school in Tampa, Florida, where I just got my hands dirty and was boots on the ground. I studied religious studies and international relations. So religion and politics somehow led me to doing work in communities with regards to like food security and food justice. I organized a lot with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers that were fighting for fair wages with tomatoes years ago with Burger King and such. And yeah, just started to work in our backyard and in our neighborhoods in Tampa and planting gardens and working with people. And, really burnt out. A lot of the institutional entities that have kind of an addiction to the nonprofit industrial complex was very difficult to get changes done and or transformations. Everybody just wants a picture with the kid planting something. It doesn't matter if there's long-term, change and dealing with toxic soils, and really looking underneath the hood of the problems that exist. And so kind of burnt out. And I met my wife getting back into farming. I was doing a lot of farm to restaurant distribution around the state of Florida, and got my hands back in the soil and was just realizing to cultivate myself as a human being and bring energy back into my life. And we made our way back to Michigan, where then I jumped into the medical cannabis industry space here, and was able to learn a lot and make a lot of great connections. And mushrooms were kind of a natural consequence in that the forests up here are riddled with them. And I was selling at the farmers market a lot. And me and a buddy just became good friends. And he was trained in kind of the laboratory side of things. And so we started to do weird things and getting mushrooms to eat cigarette butts and kind of seeing this budding movement happen, back in 2016. And we, with the pandemic hitting, we kind of pivoted out of cannabis myself and reached out to this friend and said, hey man, let's figure out, like, bring this mushroom stuff, to the forefront. And nobody's doing it where we're at in upper Michigan on the south shore of Lake Superior. And yeah, it's like up here, I come from Flint, right, where there's industry, but like up here, man, it's like toxicity is ubiquitous. And so it doesn't matter where we go. If it's in Antarctica, honestly, they're finding toxins, flying around there. It's forming, on the top layers of ice. And so I think that, wherever we're at, it's like we got to start to just come up with creative solutions. And that was really the impetus to start to build the connections and start to figure out, like, we're at the tip of the iceberg with regards to biological solutions. And for some reason, fungi have been cast aside as like just something weird. And here we are now, and fungi is kind of having a moment in time, and it's really exciting. And yeah, I think that's a bit of a summation.
Yeah, I love it. And you're absolutely right about fungi. This is like the AI of the plant kingdom, right? Like literally, it's networks, it's a bunch of weird capabilities. And it's time, right? It's actually, we need it. I mean, one of the things that I was really struck by in the previous episodes was just the scale of toxicity that exists in America. And, I've traveled quite extensively outside the country. And when I come back here, it's not uncommon that food makes me feel sick. So, let's start to see the world around us in realistic tones and understand that, it might not be great news, but there are things that we can do. So I'm really excited to have your perspective here on plants and remediation. Mariette, about AI, tell us about what that looks like and what you're working on.
Wow, so the story of how I got here from my hippie moment to working with AI, child of immigrants, grew up in New Jersey with a lot of ties to New York City, in and out of, all of that. And my family on both sides came from villages, so subsistence level villages. And I never could remember a time in my life when we didn't grow food, even if it wasn't our primary activity. I couldn't really remember a time when there wasn't a whole different language, both literally and metaphorically, around how we relate to the earth. So as I grew up, as I went to school, studied literature and philosophy and foreign languages mostly, I continued to kind of code switch and live in these different worlds. I went through a period where I did strategic marketing, and I learned at a think tank, and I learned the value of data, things I really didn't expect that I would care about, but that I have continued to use throughout my life. And long story short, between the war for independence from what was Yugoslavia, that my parents' homeland went through, and then living directly through 9/11, I had a break. And at that point, I went underground. I, became part of the techno underground, the house music, etc. Worked in it, lived it. And then I emerged in nonprofits, mostly in women's rights, reproductive rights globally, education. And again, I saw there how data and all of that really worked together. I also worked in technology. It was always a great way to freelance gig and make money. And I taught hundreds of workshops to people to teach them their technology, because that was all really rolling out into the workplace at the time. And so this type of translation that I've been doing since my childhood for different types of languages just feels right. And when I joined the Design Science Studio as a member of their second cohort, then I had the opportunity now to work with some of the people who originated the program and to really put to work all of those things. I've also worked with farmers at the Bionutrient Food Association. We've worked with open source farming, data collection and management, et cetera. And really, what I find now is that AI is this continuation of storytelling. And it's that storytelling of living systems, from the human living systems and the type of wisdom that we translate to each other and the symbolic language we translate to each other. And I do believe that at some level, what I've learned is that we are mycelial, like we are mycelia. There are entire areas where the mycelial mat no longer exists. And, you can chart, and I kind of have been doing that lately. You can chart the place where that type of consciousness of the earth, that planetary consciousness, will express itself in urban areas. And that to me is endlessly fascinating.
I love that you're bringing up storytelling with AI, because I think that's often not what we're hearing in the mainstream as AI is getting, a lot of attention. Data is almost treated like this, like oil, right? Like it's some kind of serum that you get and you can load it up into your machinery and then like bang, bang, bang. But in reality, data is like a point, right? It's a historical event of some kind. And that's what stories are all about. And so the kind of data that we want to be looking at and what we do with that data, I think is super relevant to bring to our storytellers to think about, our poets and our artists, and to really kind of think in more creative ways than maybe what we have seen so far with tech. So I love that you're bringing that perspective, and that you're sort of a woman bringing that perspective. Very much, I resonate with that as well. Like the hippie background, technology is where I ended up because it seems to be the place to actually get things done. So this is exciting. DJ, Jay Kind, tell us about your hippie story.
So my hippie story starts with the fact that I was born into a religious organization that actually believes that one day in the future, the earth is going to be a paradise and everybody's going to live peacefully on the earth. So from a child, that's been my concept. And I've just had a profound love and appreciation for the natural beauty of our surroundings, planet Earth. So as an adult, as I grew up, I kind of went separate ways from that religious organization, but I've traveled all around the world. I spent 6 months in South America, started in Colombia, ended up in Chile, and saw everything in between, from the beaches to the mountains. And I really just thoroughly enjoy the different aspects of what's on this planet. And it's really important to me that we take care of it. So I've always been interested in any kind of initiative, any kind of awareness that is teaching us how to take care of the planet, whether it's recycling, food production, what have you. And so, you know, my training, educational wise, has been focused on music business and production and technology. But I'm also very fascinated with the power of music and its ability to raise awareness on various topics, and the environment being one of them. I was very privileged to live in the mountains of California, Oakhurst, California, for about a year, and it's right outside Yosemite National Park. And it was just a really powerful experience to wake up every morning, walk out in the balcony overlooking this vast valley with mountains in the background, and really being inspired by that setting to communicate it and translate it into a musical expression. And so that's pretty much my story, my hippie story of just being in love with our environment and how that translates into musical expression for me.
I think that's the most hippie story there is, right? I was singing in the mountains and just loving the sun coming up over the crags. So, you know, I'm really struck by the fact that all of us have sort of a deep history of, you know, being around the earth in some way. And I think that's really interesting because when we talk about problems like the vinyl chloride spill in East Palestine, you know, it's atrocious and it's bad, and there's a lot of blame, but there's not a lot of sort of like dreaming about what the beautiful environment there could be. But that's probably a good way to get community members involved in thinking about these things. So let's, you know, kind of be conscious of that as a theme, very much in line with Restore-A-Thon as we go through the questions here. And I just want to kind of ask everyone, like, from a starting point, what's your approach to resolving the challenge of toxic waste and restoration in the Ohio River Valley? What would you start to think about as a solution approach, Daniel?
Yeah, you know, because this disaster has really contaminated both the soils and potentially the water system, or the water reservoirs, and the airs as well, and the local communities, I think, you know, just having a citizen science approach to, you know, taking samples and reporting back on what is actually happening in your local environment is really important, to have that awareness and build that capacity, right? So it starts, I think, with those kinds of observations, and of course, there's technologies that can help with this, and how can we empower and equip everyday citizens to you know, pay close attention to what does healthy look like and what does healthy mean to you. And I like what someone had said a little bit earlier, you know, that around I think when you and John were speaking earlier, just around you know, that when people have personal experiences, right, that's something that you know, or direct firsthand experience with their environment, it's something that nobody can take away from you, right? It's something nobody can argue with your direct firsthand experience. And when you're observing your environment and you know what it looks like, that's a really important thing. And so I think that's one area, just to have that frame of reference and that frame of mind.
What actually is the baseline for an environment, for example, and then how do you protect it, right? Once you know what good looks like, then you can begin to evaluate if something bad happens, or, you know, be prepared for something like that, which takes us into that idea of environmental litigation, right? What about Ryan? What's your strategy for how you would approach restoration in the Ohio River Valley?
You know, it's such a complex you know, situation in any community. I mean, name your, you know, urban, you know, Rust Belt, you know, kind of community, and you're going to find an insane amount of toxicity in those communities. And so I think that, you know, what Daniel's saying, I think is absolutely tantamount, like, to be able to know what's out there first. You know, for instance, it's like this new contaminant of concern that's become popular in the past, you know, 6 months. The forever chemicals known as PFAS that the EPA is now regulating, and well, these chemicals have been around for 40 years. 3M and DuPont and these companies have been manufacturing them, and they're so ubiquitous. They're entering the hydrological cycle and they're raining down on us. But it's now that they've become a problem, and so how do we address that? And I think for me, it's like recognizing that the human spirit and really the human body is truly a remarkable just life force that we can be in the most horrible polluted situations and somehow the human survives. And I think that that is extremely critical to understanding, like, first how to move forward, that we humans we've survived ice ages, we've survived, life has survived asteroids. Like, this is in our DNA to a large extent. Sure, we have these man-made chemicals which could be argued that they're technically natural, they're from nature, maybe they're not like organically present, but like they're part of the system. Matter is not created or destroyed. And so there is an organism that can break down every toxin that we've created, radioactive or otherwise, every toxin. And that's not my opinion. That's people that are way smarter than me have made these kinds of claims, and that's being researched. And so I think recognizing that there is hope, that we have to, in this maybe citizen science approach, we have to trial a lot and we have to collect good, meaningful data, both in hard science, repeatable stuff, but also observational. Are plants coming back? Are there worms in the soil? Worms are one of those key indicators that, they're so sensitive to toxins in the soil. If they're present, it's not a perfect situation, but okay, life is coming back. Life is, Fukushima, life has come back. And in Chernobyl, life is coming back to these communities. And we have to figure out those algorithms of what Mother Nature knows, and then learn those and then figure out how to scale them up. And for me, that's how do we empower those citizen scientists to then, in that mycelial way, be feeding this kind of hive mind. And when somebody comes up with a solution, like, can it be replicated? And, how do you speed up those processes? It's pollution is inevitable. I think what's concerning is, humans not being able to reproduce and our endocrine systems being so destroyed that we literally become infertile. I think that's really what's at stake. Climate change and a lot of this aside, or biodiversity collapse from our human centric perspective, like, that's a very big possibility, and it's something we have to take serious. And I don't want to leave that part out of, like, people can detox themselves right now and improve their immune systems today for free in many different ways, whether that's harvesting wild mushrooms that are medicinal, fasting, cold water plunges, sweating, all of these, different kinds of just simple tools that people can employ to begin to build their immune systems to push out those toxins. That's really where it begins in my mind, is like finding that inner power and that inner resolve to like face the situation head on.
I love that. I can totally see your like religious backbone here with like life comes back, detoxify yourself, let's get back in the game.
Absolutely.
And that's something we don't hear about enough, right? Like, we do hear a lot about toxicity, we do hear a lot about inflammation. We don't hear a lot about, yeah, but you can fix it. And there's like all of these natural things that allow you to do that. So this is a really exciting space for sure for us to explore more in the Restore-A-Thon. Mariette, let's hear from you.
Well, I really love what's already been said. And so I feel like what I'm about to say is just to build on both of the previous panelists. If I had to boil it down, I would to storytelling, mapping, and intergenerational gamification. And I'll just briefly dive into that. For me, the story is everything. And the story of the trauma, as well as the previous lovely experiences that people might have had in place, those are incredibly important because they're testament and witness. And then also in terms of mapping, I think in one of your other podcasts, there was someone who really talked about the fact that we know maps exist from the communities that are and community organizations already in place for many years. So the migratory, birds and their importance, and the riparian waterways, et cetera, all of that is mapped. So overlaying story onto mapping, to me, is a really important way of living up to what Carol Sanford, leader in regenerative business thinking, has said is place. Place is everything. Now, the only reason I add intergenerational gaming is because we're all gamers, and we don't really want to turn this into heavy work for the community. And right now, if you create, if we were, or to work with the community, like Wikipedia has, and Pokemon Go has, actually, they've done some really interesting projects in the past where they work together to support libraries. If you do that kind of thing where you make hackathons or record-a-thons, let's record a story of when you went fishing here, record a story of what this looked like, you create the kind of biophilia that's really important. And I think Charles Eisenstein has talked about this we have to reanimate nature for ourselves. And even if this community has been directly involving itself with its natural landscape, there may be a rupture there right now. And so in order to heal that rupture and to also model for other communities going forward, those would be my three main components.
I love that you're addressing that, because one of the themes that came up in our conversation with Jessica Connard was the trauma, right? It was, this is not something that I think anyone expects to experience in their life, to see actually a flaming train full of chemicals go by your house at 3 a.m, and then to experience, black water coming out of a drain and everything else that goes along with that, the health impacts. Like, it could happen to anyone at any time. That's the scary part. But who of us is like ready for that, right? And so just even addressing this from the perspective of healing, from understanding, from dealing with the reality of the world that we live in, which is more and more fractured in these ways. That is so important, I think, for building out of, what tends to be a narrative that doesn't have enough solution pathways, right? We need to make solution pathways, and that starts with storytelling. DJ, Jay Kind, what's your take on this?
My take is that these panelists and more will have, technological and other kind of solutions for actually correcting the issue there. My value and my take to this is providing a platform to raise awareness. Right, and that's done through music. Music brings people together. It's done so for centuries. It doesn't really know any boundaries. Race isn't a barrier. Music just brings people together. They like to hear it, and so one way to do this is by organizing a festival or some kind of event in that area, where we focus on Restore-A-Thon as a theme. We have workshops and classes that educate the people about what's going on, but also tie that in with the music festival, and bring people together, dance, and celebrate. And that's basically like how you can bring the community together to raise awareness and get united around bringing a better environment and correcting the issues that have happened there.
So reflecting on the answers that we have sort of data, storytelling, actual, get in the ground and plant things and bring people into it, right? So there's this kind of, really nice compatibility between all the perspectives that we have here. That's also what we need to think about in terms of fostering collaboration, right? There's diverse stakeholders, local communities, tech experts, policymakers are all involved in this, and we are trying to bring in more folks from a community lens. What are your thoughts on how to support that collaboration? And I'll open it up. If anyone has like a strong thought, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll just call on Daniel again.
Sure. Well, I can start us off. One of the things that we're doing at the MRV Collective, and I love all the concepts and ideas that have been shared, especially around community building and the different the intergenerational aspect that you mentioned, Mariette. But one of the things we have at the MRV Collective is, there's many different technology providers and different sources of data, whether that's citizen science or individual observations. But oversampling and really sharing these stories and sharing this data together is really interesting when you start to overlay to start to understand how they're connected and how they're correlated with one another, whether those are the worms that are coming back or the life that's being, reborn. But like what are these collections of observations that are happening, and telling those stories and sharing those with one another. So at the MRV Collective, we have this concept called an MRV lab in Costa Rica at the moment, where we're bringing many different providers together to share their technologies, share their tools, share their ideas, and really oversample an area, like a concrete area. And this is something that I could imagine being done in the East Palestine area as well. It could start as a community driven, supported effort, but it could also be supported within a city or like with a, within civil society. And this concept of really just oversampling, just to understand how the correlations work for that place, because we know the world is, there's so much diversity around the planet that every place is different and unique. And how can we really embrace that diversity as a form of resilience, and just honor each individual place as a unique, just as each one of us are unique, and have our own, gifts to share. Each place, I believe, has the same to offer. And so through our observations, through our storytelling, we can start to express that.
I love that. Yeah, and I'm imagining Mariette has some complementary thoughts to throw on that. So I'll pass over to you.
I do, because I think that that oversampling is really interesting to me, because it really is, you can't have enough, and the more diversity of voices is really important. It does sort of bring me back also to DJ Kind and this idea of a platform in music, and even the methods of modern music like remixing and sampling. There is a lot that can be done, again, at the intersection of data collection, science, let's say, but data collection in particular, and music production or poetry production. And I do think that we also see that in Ukraine right now. There are a bunch of ravers who have organized so many cleanups where they inspire young people to come out and clean up and participate, because they also get to hear DJs in the beginning. And that kind of non-sectarian, secular, spiritual aspect is, I think, a great motivator. So that would be my relationship to what goes on. And I know that there are so many artists and so many people that would be willing to contribute sometime, someplace. And we just kind of have to do these things of being in it, and the way does evolve.
And we are actually going to be having a rave like that, aren't we, DJ J Kind?
Yes, that is in the plan. So stay tuned for details on that. But that's something that we want to do for sure.
We're brewing ideas already. Question for you, Ryan. Do you think that would work in the context, like you mentioned the sort of burnout that you faced in Florida, right? Dealing with nonprofits and so on. Do you think that actually bringing together, new voices, new perspectives with data, with tech, with storytelling, with music, with the whole shebang would be something that could kind of break through that gridlock and start to build a different kind of conversation with those folks as well?
Hey, look, if the revolution doesn't have dancing part of it, like, I don't want to be a part of it, right? Like, I think that's at the center. I mean, how do we refill our cups, and help each other? When somebody has a cup that's overflowing, how do we fill our brothers and sisters' cups? Like, I think, that's such a crucial piece that's missing from a lot of institutions. Governments and corporations, they're not going to do it for us, right? Like, we have to do it for ourselves. And I think communities like East Palestine and other communities are waking up to that fact again and again and again, that, like, the government and the corporations are not going to be the ones to come pull us out of this mess that we've been handed, that we've woken up to. And I think that for me, it's like, I locate a lot of these issues as like a process of human liberation, and that we are continually realizing how we're oppressed and we're held back in different ways, and then we're pulling up that oppressor, that oppressed within us, and we're moving towards this fuller freedom. And I think that toxicity, pollution, this is definitely it's becoming kind of a center focus in a lot of communities, that this is something that is holding us back as humans in many ways. But I think that, it's really about the pedagogy for me, like how we're lifting each other's consciousness, right? If it's just the colonizer consciousness that's coming in and it's depositing, into a community and saying like, hey, we can be your savior, like it's going to fall flat. It's going to then, it's going to fizzle out once people leave. But if people's in those communities and their consciousness is lifted and they are learning to name the world in a dialectic process with other people, right? The student teacher dichotomy kind of goes back and forth, that nobody has the total answer, but we collectively, can help to name and understand these systems better. I think that for me, that's what can break through and build not just coalitions, but just like long lasting liberatory processes. Because once you solve the pollution problem, like, well, it's probably going to happen again. So how do we prevent it? Well, that's a bigger systemic issue of like, let's talk about entrenchment in policy and corporations, and like, why aren't they being held accountable? Why are these, regulatory crackdowns happening now? Like, why, right? And so I think, this is, it's the pedagogy. It's like how we approach communities and work with them, not as like another government or corporation saying, we're going to help you, but like, like, hey, what do you need? How can we support you? And, how do you understand that this problem is affecting you? And learning and really, just helping to draw those connections, I think is one strategy. I mean, personally, in my experience, that's where a lot of that institutional failures have happened,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we need to rebuild culture. We need to rebuild land. And a lot of those things go together. And I think that making it a party is a very approachable way to do that. So what we're doing at Restore-A-Thon is inviting everyone to kind of build a project around a catalyst of their choice. Could be one of our panelists, could be someone that they know, to address one of the aspects of the problem spaces. And we've laid out a few, right? There's data, there's storytelling, there's community, there's engineering, there's plants, there's other types of tech that can do, real kinds of action on the ground. So that's the context. Just quickly before we wrap up, what are like, another 1 minute or so from everyone, what are the biggest sort of warnings about impediments that you would offer to folks that are looking to participate in the Restore-A-Thon? Daniel.
Impediments for individuals there in East Palestine, or anywhere?
What have you seen that can be a challenge in actually like creating and implementing projects like this? And what's like a word of advice for thinking about that in advance for teams?
Yeah, I think rushing into solutions is something that I see. It's like, I think it's really important to be humble, to listen to one another, especially around diverse perspectives, right? And spend time, just asking, just listening, right, to one another, and for people to exchange their ideas, and really just it's okay to have differences of perspective, and to have disagreements, right? But to just recognize that everybody has a point of view and everyone's point of view is valid. Yeah.
Yes, conversation is key. Ryan.
Yeah, I feel like, kind of playing on what Mariette was saying about, trauma-informed spaces, I think is crucial in these conversations, so as not to just continually relive that trauma, and, and because, right, like disaster capitalism, as Naomi Klein has really articulated it, like in these moments, people are very vulnerable, and capitalism will come through again and just take advantage of these disasters. And I think, it's if we can work through trauma-informed spaces effectively in this new kind of pedagogy, then it's like, well, people then can replace what has been a disaster and can, put in rebuild something that's more in line with our spirits and how Mother Nature's laws are. And I think that's, it's kind of the painting a vision. I think the vision is hard, and that has to be built from the ground up. But that's what we all can then collectively see, and then we work towards that. And but yeah, just that trauma informed spaces and like pedagogy are just like, yeah, there's in my mind, they're just key to really building long lasting transformation.
So we've got listen to each other, build a vision, being conscious of sort of the dynamics of place, like trauma. Mariette, what would you add to that?
I think I'd go back to something you and Jon were talking about earlier, which is dreaming. And I think that it's very easy to sometimes feel defeated and admit defeat. And it's another thing to admit success. And it's another thing entirely to trust in dreams. And that sort of apathy that serves large institutions and systemic structural complacency is really a problem for all of us, because we hear it from all different corners of media and from our own experience to some extent all the time. So I think that dreaming towards our success and believing that that is just many steps or a few steps or however many steps away doesn't really matter. Getting to that it would be really important.
Yeah, believe that it can happen. Step one. DJ Jay Kind, what's your take? What's your last thought to close us out?
I think the only thing I can add to that really is that you really have to triage the multiple ideas that are going to come to play, right? There's a lot of experts, and there's going to be a lot of solutions that come to the table. And the reality is that you can't enact all of them, right? And so there has to be some leadership and triaging the solutions that come to the table and choosing the one or the ones that have the biggest impact, and they're able to actually be rolled out. And so there's leadership and the ability to triage an effective solution to this kind of ecological disaster.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super actionable. Leadership, impact, listen, build a vision and believe in it. Go for it. Let's freaking go. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this panel and for joining us today on the Restore-A-Thon. We will be in touch with next steps. And once again, we are here to invite you to dream about the future with us. We will rejuvenate the earth and each other.
Do you or someone you know have a sailboat in the Ohio River Valley? We'd like to team build from the river itself. Please contact restore.a.thon@gmail.com to hook us up with a local captain.